Welcome to the deep dive. So, today we're tackling an idea that might really surprise you. The data we've looked at suggests modern stress isn't just, a personal failing or being too busy. It's actually being framed as a disease, potentially the single biggest thing wearing humanity down right now.
It sounds, well, maybe a bit extreme at first glance, doesn't it? But when you look at the numbers, we really are talking about a global health epidemic, not just everyone having a bad day.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to analyze research that looks at stress, not just psychologically,
hmm
but also through these other lenses like engineering, physics, even hard data. We want to understand how stress works, almost like a predictable machine, how it can fail, and crucially, how you can build defenses against future stress rather than just, putting out fires.
And you really have to start with the scale. It's staggering. The World Health Organization, they've actually called stress the health epidemic of the 21st century.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And get this statistic. Somewhere between 70 and 90% of all doctor's visits in the US are reported as being somehow stress related.
70 to 90%. That's nearly everything. That means stress is basically lurking behind almost every consultation.
Pretty much. And we see the fallout everywhere. Like 77% of Americans report physical health problems from stress and 73% mental health issues,
Okay, so body and mind.
both. And the economic impact, it's terrifying.
Hmm.
In the UK, for example, stress has now overtaken musculoskeletal problems, bad backs. RSI is the #1 reason for work-related absence.
Really, more than physical injuries.
Yep. We're talking 17.9 million working days lost every year just because people are completely overwhelmed.
The cost is just massive, immediate. But there was this demographic bit that really jumped out at me. You'd sort of assume the big burden is on older, established professionals,
Sure.
right? But the sources pointed somewhere else, especially for one group.
Yeah, that's the generational paradox, isn't it? It turns out the younger you are, the more stressed you're likely to be. 61% of Gen Z adults, that's ages 18 to 23, report feeling stressed. That's way higher than older generations.
61%. That's incredibly high for people just starting out.
Exactly. Something about modern life is just fundamentally hitting our newest adults really hard, often before they even get deep into their careers.
Okay, if the stats are that bad, we need to look under the hood.
Hmm.
How does this predictable machine actually work?
Well, to get modern stress, you first have to understand its ancient purpose. We all have this. Let's call it the body's automated performance engine. It's the HPA axis.
HPA axis.
Oh, your amygdala, that's the brain's little alarm center that spots a threat. It tells the hypothalamus, which signals the adrenal glands, and boom, cortisol floods your system. That's your biological panic button.
That burst of extra energy,
Yeah.
the octane for survival you mentioned.
Exactly. But here's the critical point. It was designed for a very specific, very temporary job, boosting your physical power to run from a predator or fight off an attacker. That whole physiological surge, the adrenaline, the cortisol, it really only lasts maybe 90 seconds biologically. The massive flaw today is that this powerful engine was never built to handle the constant low-level lingering stress from things like email alerts, traffic jams, or, doom scrolling social media.
So the machine's built for a 90-second sprint from a tiger.
Mm.
But modern life gives us this drip, drip, drip of stress basically all day long.
You've got it. That mismatch is key.
Which is why the sources suggest shifting perspective, away from just biology, maybe towards physics or engineering. It's fascinating how experts are starting to model stress like it's, predictable, almost like it fits mathematical equations.
It's a really good analogy, actually. Think about fatigue in physics, like in material science.
Yeah.
An airplane wing, right? It rarely snaps because of one single massive storm. It usually fails because of tiny microscopic stress fractures caused by thousands, millions of small repeated vibrations over time. That builds up fatigue and eventually snap. Our brains, our bodies, they work in a similar way. One awful meeting probably won't break you, but 50 annoying emails every single day, week after week, that repetition leads to breakdown.
And the math part, that brings some control back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stress isn't just what happens to you. It's a function of those events plus your own abilities, your skills, the resources you have to handle it all. Like a tough obstacle course might feel easy for a trained athlete, but totally impossible for someone else.
Exactly right, which leads us straight back to reframing the cause. The sources are really clear on this. It's not the events of our lives that stress us, it's the way we deal with them that does.
Okay, so let's unpack where these modern stressors actually come from. The sources use this framework, TONN. TONN.
Trauma, obsessions, nuisances, and noise.
Right, so trauma, obviously that's major, often needs expert help. Obsessions are those thoughts that just loop and loop after a trigger.
Yeah, those are significant, but maybe less frequent for most people day to day. The real relentless daily grind often comes from the other two. Nuisances and noise. These are the small, numerous ones.
Nuisances, those are the external micro-stressors, right? Like the commute, the coworker who hums constantly, the printer always being out of paper.
Precisely. Those are the little cards in that house of cards analogy you mentioned earlier. They just stack up, almost unnoticed, until one final tiny thing like you spill your coffee or you can't find your keys and the whole structure just collapses. You have a complete meltdown over something trivial.
Been there. Okay, so that's nuisances. What about noise?
Ah, noise. This one is arguably even more powerful and definitely more destructive because we generate it ourselves. Entirely internally.
Internal. You mean like our thought?
Exactly. The constant internal chatter, the self-criticism, the worry loop, the replaying of regrets, the forecasting of doom, that inner monologue. It can generate the equivalent of over 4,000 words per minute.
Wait, 4,000 words a minute inside our heads?
Equivalent word rate, yeah. It's an estimate of the sheer volume of internal processing. It's exhausting. A self-perpetuating cycle of stress.
Wow, that's a lot of internal negativity potential.
And it's so potent because, one, it's always running, and two, it's often based on assumptions, fears, not actual facts. But your primitive brain, it doesn't know the difference between a real saber-toothed tiger outside the cave and your own inner voice telling you you're an idiot.
It just registers threat.
Ongoing, life-threatening reality. So it keeps dumping the cortisol, keeps that stress response switched on indefinitely, even when you're perfectly safe sitting on your couch. That's the swirl pool they talk about. Yeah. It leads directly to things like hypervigilance, constant anxiety, insomnia.
Okay, so if the biggest threat is often the one we're kind of manufacturing in our own heads, then the path to getting some control must start with, like, interrupting that process.
Exactly. Which brings us to this core strategy, the way to deal with these relentless, stressful thoughts, your 3 anchors of sanity.
3 anchors.
Think of a stressful thought like a fire alarm going off in your head. You don't just panic and run in circles. You need a focused 3-step check.
Right. So anchor number 1 is it true?
Precisely. Your brain, remember, it's wired for survival. That means it has a built-in negativity bias. It exaggerates threats to keep you safe.
Okay.
So if that internal voice starts screaming, I'm going to get fired, I'll lose my house, I'll end up on the street, you have to stop and ask, point blank, is it literally factually true that I will lose everything and be destitute?
And often the answer is probably not.
Often it's a clear no. It's an exaggeration, a fiction spun out of anxiety. And if the answer is no, the instruction is simple. Drop the thought immediately. Recognize it as a fabrication and disengage.
Interrupt the cycle right there. Okay. What if the thought is kind of true?
Good question. That brings us to anchor number 2. What can I do to fix it? If the thought has some basis in reality, let's say, I am genuinely not prepared for that big presentation on Friday, then you must immediately shift into problem-solving mode.
So less worry, more action.
Exactly. This is useful thinking. It moves you away from that draining self-criticism loop because you're now being constructive. You're actually taking steps to improve the situation. Make a plan, schedule practice time, ask for help, whatever it takes.
Okay, that makes sense. Fix what you can fix. But what about things you just can't fix? The irreversible stuff.
That's why anchor number 3 comes in, and it's crucial. Can I accept it and do something to make life better despite it? This is for the really hard things. The death of someone close, a final job loss, maybe a relationship ending for good, things that are truly irreversible. This requires what the sources call committed acceptance.
Committed acceptance. That sounds hard. It's not just giving up.
No, definitely not surrender. It's about acknowledging the near, perhaps harsh reality, saying, okay, this is the situation now. And then crucially, committing to taking small, positive actions to build a different, better life moving forward from that point. Maybe that means writing that book you always thought about, starting a small side project, pouring energy into a new hobby or community. It's about rebuilding, despite the loss.
Focusing on action again, breaking the mental loop, which connects to that physiological thing you mentioned earlier, the 90-second limit.
Yes, the 90-second rule. It's such a powerful little tool for quick intervention. Basically, when an emotional circuit gets triggered, like anger, or fear, the actual physiological response, the chemicals like adrenaline washing through your system, they flush out completely within about 90 seconds.
90 seconds, that's it. That's the whole chemical lifespan of the feeling.
The initial chemical surge, yes.
So if I find myself still furious or anxious, like 20 minutes after something happened.
Then it's not the original chemicals holding you hostage anymore. It's because you are choosing, consciously or unconsciously, to rethink the trigger thought over and over. Each time you replay it in your mind, you restart that chemical cycle. You're basically redosing yourself with stress chemicals.
Oh, wow. So the bad news is I'm doing it to myself.
But the good news is you have a choice. Every 90 seconds or so, you have a potential exit ramp. You can choose not to re-engage with that thought loop. You can break the cycle.
Okay, that 90-second window, it sounds great in theory, but let's be real. If I'm totally overwhelmed, deep in a crisis, how do I actually manage to step back and just, observe the chemicals flushing out? Isn't that asking a bit much when you're freaking out?
That's a really vital point, because it's not about suddenly achieving Zen mastery in the middle of chaos. It requires practice, training. You don't just jump straight to detached observation. You use the anchors we just talked about as the tool to create that space.
Okay, so the anchors come first.
Yes. If that 90 seconds passes and you're still spiraling, you immediately activate anchor 1. Okay, wait. Is this thought I keep repeating actually literally true right now, or am I just looping a worst-case scenario? That act of cognitive interruption, switching from automatic fear to deliberate inquiry, that's what creates the pause. That's what allows you to recognize, oh, right, I'm just re-triggering the chemicals, and gives you the chance to step off the loop. It's about substituting the automatic reaction with a trained response.
Okay, that clarifies it perfectly. It's not magic. It's a practice skill using the anchors.
Got it. So bringing all these pieces together, what does the path towards becoming genuinely, unstressable actually look like in practice? The sources boiled it down to 3 core actions, right? The 3 L's.
That's right, the 3 L's. These are your main preventative strategies. First one is limit.
Limit.
You have to actively reduce your repeated exposure to stressors, especially the ones that offer zero benefit or actionable outcome. A classic example is the news cycle, constantly consuming news about global problems you personally cannot influence. That just triggers your stress machine for no productive reason. The advice is actively limit it. Only seek out information you can actually do something about.
Makes sense. Be intentional about your input. Okay, second L.
Second L is learn. You have to consciously invest time and effort in developing coping skills. This is where you practice things like the 3 anchors until they become almost automatic. Knowing about them isn't enough. You need the practice, the repetition to really integrate them into your mental toolkit. Right? Knowledge isn't skill. Practice makes it real. And the third L?
Third L is listen. This means learning to recognize the language your own stress speaks. How does it show up in your mind, in your heart, your emotions, in your physical body? Even, some sources say, in your soul or sense of purpose. You need to pay attention to those early, subtle warning signs, which leads us directly back to the physical side of things, that non-negotiable maintenance.
Yeah, we touched on how neglecting the body can just flip that HPA switch right back on, regardless of external events.
Absolutely. You have to treat your body like a machine that needs regular daily upkeep. The sources talk about the 8 bodily pleas. Things like move, restore, stretch, relax, breathe properly, fuel well, digest properly, and crucially, snooze.
Snooze, sleep.
Yeah, these are framed as essential, non-negotiable system checks. And honestly, if you had to pick just one to prioritize for stress management, it's probably sleep.
Why is sleep deprivation such a potent stressor specifically? What's the mechanism there?
Because, biochemically, sleep deprivation is a stressor. It creates a signature in the brain that looks almost identical to the signature of genuine physical danger, like starvation or imminent attack.
Oh, wow. All right.
So when you're chronically underslept, your body is essentially sending panic signals to your HPA axis saying, we're under threat, even if your life circumstances are fine. The source material had this really stark warning. It said something like, sleeping just 2 fewer hours a night for a week can make your body machine turn around almost as if to kill you.
That's a lot. That's intense wording.
It reflects the chemical reality. Chronic sleep debt drives up cortisol, it damages muscle tissue, it encourages inflammatory fat storage, it hampers frontal lobe function, making rational thinking harder. You simply cannot achieve genuine emotional calm if your physical systems are screaming at your brain that you're in survival mode. Prioritizing sleep. It's probably the single most powerful lever you can pull to turn down the volume on that internal stress machine.
This has been incredibly illuminating. Taking something most of us just file under, having a bad day or being too busy, and seeing it as this chronic, almost mechanical breakdown process. But the really hopeful part, the takeaway, is that because so much of it is self-generated or amplified internally, that knowledge gives us power. Knowing the mechanisms, having the tools like the anchors, the 90-second awareness, the 3 Ls, it really does give you immense control back. You don't have to feel like just a helpless victim of, the mighty wheels of life.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with is this. Hardship. It's part of the human deal. Everyone faces difficulty, loss, tough times. That's universal. But if you can manage to step back and look at the broader sweep of your life, most of the time the baseline is actually ease, relative safety. Things are mostly okay. Hardship is actually the anomaly. That's why it makes the news headlines, right? Because it stands out from the norm.
That's a really powerful reframing. But
Yeah.
thinking back to the Gen Z stats you mentioned earlier, for them, things like massive student debt, impossible housing costs, climate anxiety, that might feel like the baseline, not the anomaly. How does that baseline of ease idea apply when facing genuine systemic challenges?
That's a critical distinction. You don't use this idea to dismiss or minimize the reality of very real systemic struggles. That would be invalidating. Instead, it's about recognizing where your energy is going. You use the anchors and the awareness of internal noise not to ignore the external problem, but to stop wasting precious energy just spinning in anxiety about it. The goal is to recognize which moments are actually okay right now to conserve that energy, and then channel the focus and energy saved from not amplifying the stress internally into constructive external action, addressing the actual problem. It's about using the reality of the struggle not as fuel for internal torment, but as fuel for what the sources call post-traumatic growth and practical change-making. Find the ease where it exists, build resilience, and then tackle the real issues more effectively.
A really vital clarification: use the internal tools to free up energy for external solutions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this incredibly important deep dive today.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep digging deeper.